What's up everybody, Aditya Mahajan here and welcome back to yet another YouTube video. So in today's video, we'll be looking at top Django interview questions and this is from the interview bit. I'll share the link in the description. So similar to previous that we covered for Android, and this will cover Django interview questions and we have distributed the questions into three parts. So I have not distributed, interview bit has distributed. That is basic questions, intermediate questions, and then advanced questions. So we'll be looking into that, and without the further ado, let's get started. So Django was named after Django Reinhardt, which is a high-level Python-based open-source web framework. Now it follows MVT, that is Model View Template Architectural Pattern. So they have started creating it in 2003, and it was publicized under public PSD license in 2005. Some of the popular firms who are using Django are PBS, Instagram, Mozilla, etc. Now, if we talk about advantages of Django, then they have rich ecosystem. Its maturity is also quite good because they published in 2005 and it's 2022. We also have an admin panel to do basic CRUD operations on the model. Then we also have quite a lot of plugins, libraries, and also we have an ORM, which is also very great advantage. That is object relational mapper, I guess, which helps in manipulating the data in a more object-oriented way. Now let's get started with basic Django interview questions. So the first question that we have is, explain the Django architecture. So as we know, it follows MVT, that is Model View Template Architecture, which is very similar to Model View Controller, but the only difference is that the controller is handled by framework itself, that is the Django framework, and we are having the template, which basically shows the presentation layer. Now, HTML is mixed with Python, or which is not exactly Python, but it is Django template language. And we provide model, view, and template, which then maps to a particular URL, and then Django serves it to the user. So this is what the view is. So we have model and template, which goes to the view, which maps to a particular URL, and it is served to the user. Next question, what we have is, what is the directory structure that is present? So most important file is manage.py, which is a command line utility that allows us to interact with the Django project, like creating a super user, starting a server, making migration, etc. Next, we have init.py file, which shows that the current directory structure we are working with is a Python package. Next, we have settings.py, which comprises of configurations of current project, that is database connection, template engine, static folder that we are placing, etc. Next, we have urls.py. It has basically the mappings that user might go to, or the URLs for our particular project. Next, we have wsgi.py file. It is an entry point for our application, which is used by web server to serve the project that we have created. Next question, what we have is, what are models in Django? So model refers to a class that maps to database table or database collection, and each attribute of Django model class represents a database field. So they are defined in app/models.py, that is every particular app, and in that models.py file. So we have given an example. So they are mentioning that every model is inherited from django.db.models.model. So this is exactly same, models.model. And here we are creating two fields. One is character and other is integer. So this is the limit of the character, and we are naming it field 1 and field 2. So the meta class helps us to set things like available permissions, whether it is singular or plural version of name, associate database table name, and whether the model is abstract or not. Next question, what we have is, what is Django template language, or what are templates in Django? So template refers to MVT architecture T in that, and they generally comprise of HTML, CSS, and Java, in which there are dynamic variables and information are embedded with the help of views. So some constructs are recognized and interpreted by template engine, so which helps in taking out the tags and the variables, and main one are variables and the tags. Okay, that's what I said. So a template is rendered with a context. So context has all the key value pairs of variables that we want to replace. So rendering just replaces variables with their value present in context and processes the tags. Everything else just remains the same. So DTL consists of 4 constructs. One of them is variable, second is tags, third is filter, and finally we have comments. Next question, what we have is, what are views in Django? So views, or view function, is simply a Pythonic function that takes the web request and returns a web response. Now the responses can be HTML contents of the web page, or redirect a 404 error, or XML document, or image, anything. The example that they have given is we initially import HTTP response from django.http. We have a function and then that takes in a request and it returns an HTTP response. So here it is a string. Now we have two types of views. First is functional based views where we import our view as a function, and second is class based views, which is an object oriented approach. Next question is what is Django ORM? So ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. So I was correct. Enables us to interact with databases in a Pythonic way so that we avoid writing raw queries, and which helps us to retrieve, save or delete or perform other operations on the database without writing an SQL query. So it works an abstraction layer between models and database. Next, we have define static files or explain their uses. So these are used to serve additional file like images, JavaScript, CSS, etc. And they are referred to as static files. And in it, we also have a package called as django.contrib.static files to manage these static files. Next question is what is Django REST framework, DRF, which is an open source framework to handle RESTful APIs or create them very rapidly. Moving on to next question, what is Django admin and manage.py and explain its command. So now Django admin is a command line utility for administrative tasks. Now this Django admin and manage.py are automatically created in each Django projects, and it also does the same purpose as Django admin, but along with that it also create a Django setting module. This is set to the environment variable project setting file. Okay. Next, what we have, there are a lot of commands that we can run with Django admin. So most important one of them are help, which lists all of the commands. Then is version to check the Django version. After that, we have make migration, which detects all the migrations or changes to your models that we have created. Migrate to execute the SQL commands for that. Then we have run server to start the server so that it gives us a URL and we can hit to that to get to our app. Then we have a shell to create a starts an interactive Python interpreter. Then we have a start app, which basically creates a new app inside a project. Start a project to create a new project. Then we have test to run our tests for all our apps. Then change password and create a super user, which are like very simple. So after that question we have is what is Jinja templating. So it is a templating engine, and the latest version is Jinja 2. And some of the features that is provided is sandbox execution, which is used for automating the testing process. We have HTML escaping, that is for characters like greater than, less than, ampersand. So these have if we directly use regular text, in that case there could be a possibility of XSS attacks, which Jinja deals very easily. Then we have template inheritance, and also Jinja generate the HTML template files faster and debugs very easily with the, rather than the default engine that we have. Question number 11 is what are Django URLs? So URLs are one of the most important parts of web application, and Django provides you with an elegant way to design your custom URLs. This is done with the help of module known as URLCon for URL configuration. The basic functionality of this Python module is to that we can design your own URLs in Django in a way that we particularly want. Then map that URL to a Python function, or we also called it as a view function. Now these URLs can be static or the dynamic. Now the URLs are present in urls.py py file, and where they are matched with the equivalent view function. So the syntax is like this. So we import path from django.urls, and we also import views to map it to a particular function. Then we create a URL pattern variable, and in that we call the path function, and we give the specific path where if user hits to this particular path, then we go to data underscore 2020 function in views. Okay. Similarly, this is a dynamic way of representing any particular URL. Next question is what is difference between a project and an app in Django? Now, in simple words, project is an entire Django application, whereas app is a module inside the project that deals with one particular use case. So for example, a login, a payment, or a login card, a checkout card, sorry. Okay, so that refers to any particular app. Now, what are different model inheritance styles in Django? So there are basically three types. So first is abstract base class inheritance. Used when we only need parent class to hold information that you don't want to write for each child model. Now, multi-table model inheritance is used when we are subclassing an existing model and need each model to have its own table in the database. Third is proxy model inheritance and is used to retain the model's field while altering the Python level functioning of that particular model. Moving on to some intermediate question. Question number 14 is, what are Django signals? So whenever we make modification to a model, we need to trigger some actions. Now Django provides an elegant way to handle these in the form of signals. Now signals are utilities that allow us to associate events with the action. Now we can implement this by developing a function that will run on a signal call. Now the built-in signals that are given in the models are as follows. So first is pre-init and post-init, which is called before and after models init method is called. Next we have signals.presave, signals.postsave, which is sent before and after models save method is called. Then we have signals.predelete and postdelete, which is called before and after of models delete or query set delete method is called. Next we have signals m2m underscore change, which is sent when many to many field is changed. And then we have signals.request started or request finished, and this is sent when an HTTP request is started or finished. Next question what we have is, explain the caching strategies in Django. Now caching refers to storing output result so that when they are processed initially, next time whenever the same is requested, we can return the same results directly rather than processing it again. So this leads to faster access and less resource utilization. And Django provides us with robust cache system, and we are able to store dynamic web pages so that we do not need to evaluate them on every request. Some of the caching strategies are as follows. First is memcache. So we store the request in the memory and it is fastest and more efficient. Now, then we have file system caching, that is the values are cached or stored in the file in a serialized order. Then we have local memory caching. So this is by default used by Django if we haven't set anything, and it is pre-processed as well as thread safe. Next what we have is database caching. Now this would be stored in our database and works well if our database server is fast and well indexed. Next question what we have is, explain user authentication in Django. Now we have an inbuilt authentication system which handle object like users, group and user permission and few cookie based user sessions. Now Django user authentication not only authenticates but also authorizes that particular user. It consists and operates on these following objects, that is users, permissions, groups, password hashing system, forms validation and a pluggable backend system. Question number 17, how do we configure static files? So first we go to settings.py file, which is present in the root directory, and we check for the installed apps section, and in there we make sure that django.contrib.static files is added. We also add a variable named as static URL with this directory structure. That is this directory, it would basically be our folder name. Now in any particular template, we can use a static tag to create a URL from the given relative path. Okay, so basically for every template we need to initialize the static, that is load static in percentage and curly braces. Then we can add a static tag with the same format, that is we write static and then the path for the resource that we are linking to. Then we create a static folder in our particular app and then put the static files in there, whatever we want to access. Next question is, explain Django response lifecycle. So whenever a request is made, Django creates an HTTP object that contains the metadata about the request. Now when Django loads any particular view, passing the HTTP request as first argument to the view function. Every view would be returning an HTTP response object. Now how the basic flow is like, initially we Django goes to settings.py file where middlewares are loaded, middleware classes. Now in the middlewares are also executed in the sequence that they are given, and for every request now it will go to URL router and it will simply map to any particular function, view function that we have in urls.py file. Now as soon as it's get mapped, the view function is called and equivalent response is generated, and that response is passed through the middlewares and sent back to the client or browser. Question number 19 asks, what databases are supported by Django? So PostgreSQL, MySQL, SQLite, Oracle, etc. Now apart from this, with the help of third party, we can also support for ODBC, Microsoft SQL Server, IBM DB2, SAP SQL Anywhere, Firebird, etc. Now SQL officially does not support NoSQL database, but we can get them working if we need. Next question is, what's the use of session framework? Using session framework, you can easily store and retrieve arbitrary data on the basis of pre-site visitors. It stores data on server side and takes care of process of sending and receiving cookies. So these cookies just consist of session ID, not actual data itself, unless we explicitly use cookie based backend. Now, what's the use of middleware in Django? Now, middleware is something that executes between requests that we get from client and the response that we send. In simple word, you can say it acts as a bridge between request and response. Similarly, in Django, when a request is made, it moves through middleware to views and data is passed through the middleware as a response. Now, what is context in Django? So context is dictionary mapping template, variable name given to Python objects in Django. So this is a general name, but we can give whatever we want. Next question is, what is Django.shortcuts.render function? So when a view function returns a web page as HTTP response, instead of simple string, we use render function. So it is a shortcut function that lets developer easily pass data dictionary with the help of template. Now, this data dictionary refers to the context that we just saw. This function then combines the template with a data dictionary via templating engine. Finally, this render function returns an HTTP response with the rendered text, which is data returned by the models. Thus, Django render bypasses most of developers' work and lets him use templating engines. So the basic syntax is the render, then we have a request, then we have a template name. So other options are optional, that is we have which are set to null by default. Okay, the request is a parameter that generates the response. The template name is HTML template used, whereas context is the dictionary data passed on the page from the Python. You can also specify content type, status, data passed, and render you are returning. Next question is, what's the significance of settings.py file? So as the name suggests, this file stores the configurations or settings of our Django projects, like database configuration, backend engine, middleware, installed application, URL configuration, static files, templating engines, etc. Okay. Next question is, how to view all items in a particular model. So we can do model name.objects.all. How do we use filter item on any particular model? We take the model name, some same objects, and then we add we call a function called filter, and in that we need to give the filter name and what term we need to search. Now moving on to advanced Django interview question. Question number 27 is, how to use file-based session. So in settings.py file, we need to set the session engine to the following, that is django.contrib.session.backends.file. Question number 28 is, what is mixin? So it is a type of multiple inheritances where we can combine behaviors and attributes of more than one parent class. Now it provides us with an excellent way to reuse code from multiple classes, but the problem with this is that it becomes difficult to analyze what a particular class is doing and which methods to override in case of code being too scattered between multiple classes. Question number 29 is, what is Django field class? So field refers to an abstract class that represents a column in Django database table. The field class is just a subclass of register lookup mixin. In Django, these fields are used to create database table, that is db underscore types function, which are used to map Python tables to database using a getPref value function, and the other way around using from db underscore value method. Therefore, fields are fundamental pieces of Django APIs such as model and query sets. Question number 30, why is permanent redirection not a good option? So permanent redirection is used only when you don't want the visitors to lead to the old URL, because the response of permanent redirection is cached in the browser, that is client side. So whenever we try to redirect to something else, it will cause issues since it is a browser side operation. And if user wants to move to something else, but still it will load the same page. Question number 31, what is the difference between Django one-to-one field and foreign key field? So both of them are most common types of fields used. The only difference between those two is that foreign key field consists of on delete option along with a model's class, because it's used for many to one relationship. While on the other hand, for one-to-one field only carries out one-to-one relation and requires only model's class. Question number 32, how can we combine multiple query sets into a view? So we can do that with the chain function from iter tools. So what we are basically doing is we are concatenating query sets into lists and we just can use them. So the syntax is we take a list and we call a list function where we can use chain from iter tools and concatenate the query sets. Okay, so how to get a particular item in the model? So we can directly call the model name and objects.get and whatever the id is present. Now if there is no result for that query, then there is a does not exist exception raised. But if there are multiple objects returned, then in that we have multiple objects return exception. Moving on to question number 34, how to obtain SQL query from the query set? So we just do query set.query, and if we print that, we can see it in console. Question number 35, what are the ways to customize the functionality of Django admin interface? So there are multiple ways we can do it. The first is we can piggyback on top of an add or change form that automatically gets generated. Second is you can add JavaScript modules using the JS parameter. This parameter is actually a list of URL that points to JavaScript modules that are included in your project within a script tag. Third thing, you can also write views for admin if you want. Question number 36, different between select related and prefetch related. So both are used to fetch the related fields in the model, but their functioning is a slightly different. So select related uses a foreign key relationship that is using join on the query itself, while on the prefetch related there is a separate lookup and joining on the Python side. So let's try to illustrate with the example that they have given. So we have two models, one is country and other is state. So in country, we have a char field country name. In state, we have one char field state name and other foreign key country. Now for states.object. They have called the object select related and once called the object prefetch related. And they have also printed the query that was being executed. So you can compare both of them. Okay. Moving on to the next question, we have explained queue objects in Django ORM. So queue objects are used to write complex queries as in filter function. Just and the condition, while if you want to or, then the condition you can use queue objects. Let's see an example. So they have imported models and they have imported queue from db.models. And for writing a filter, I mean, it is very similar to that. So what happens is we call objects.get and then we do and for whatever we are separated with the comma, and for or we do a pipe operator. So the query that gets executed is this. Okay. And the last question is, what are Django exceptions? So in addition to Python exception, Django raises its own exceptions.list of the exceptions. So you can read them from the documentation. So that's all for this video, guys. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up button. If you need more such content for lead code, data structure algorithm, for interview experiences, etc., do subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next one.